what are you doing with him if you're hearing from teams on him? And I'm going to tell you what I've heard recently. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, look, the Obi Toppin question has been kind of the small elephant in the room, maybe bigger for some people, since they drafted him, and then whatever it was, a month and a half, however long you want to say, into that first season, it became clear that the guy in front of him, the guy who they, ostensibly drafted Obi Toppin to replace, was turning into a different sort of player with a different sort of value for the franchise. So I think whenever we talk about Obi Toppin, there's kind of the conversation of their process originally in drafting him and what they did with him and Julius Randle way back when. But then I think that's a different question from like what they're left with now. And what they're left with now is the reality of a player who, they're winning games. They have a formula. Tom Thibodeau likes his rim protection. There is no path for this player to get more than 12 to 15 minutes a night here. So for me, it's like I'm wondering, is the front office thinking, okay, well, what are the scenarios in which that changes here? And what is the likelihood of any of those scenarios actually taking place? Versus, is there enough of a way to maximize him now via trade? And I have to think that those are some uncomfortable conversations, especially since the people that were behind drafting Obi Toppin are still here. It's the same regime. It's not like they've been fired. So I don't even know how those conversations go. Must be difficult.
Yeah, I think that also you take into account what you were talking about, John, with is this going to change? Is there going to be a place for Obi Toppin to get more minutes? We haven't seen it with Tom Thibodeau and Julius Randle and everything to date. And I don't see, an obvious way that it changes. So then I think if you're the Knicks too, you think, is his value as a trade piece just going to decline from here on out? Is this his peak value as a trade piece? I think that has to enter the conversation a little bit. I know that, teams have called and the Knicks have engaged in talks on Obi Toppin. I know there was a report about Utah and Toppin. I think that the Knicks weren't willing to pay what Utah was asking for in terms of Vanderbilt and Beasley, and that also, it doesn't even get into the idea that you mentioned earlier. I don't think there's a consensus on Beasley and Vanderbilt in terms of how they fit with this Knicks team. But I think Utah had some interest in Toppin. Several teams, I think, really like Toppin, and I think it's just a matter of, do the Knicks get a price point met here in the next, what are we at, 2.5 days, 3 days between now and the deadline? But I do think the idea of him, his value as a trade asset, has to enter the conversation somewhat, because he is eligible for that extension this summer, and there's no obvious path for him to get more playing time.